Hello, everybody. My name is Jonathan Elmer. I am the director of the College Arts and Humanities Institute here at Indiana University. Several times each semester, CAHI hosts an event in which we celebrate the great work of our colleagues. We call it Meet the Artist or Meet the Author. As is the case today, we call it Meet the Author. In fact, today we call it Meet the Authors, because artists, excuse me, because there will be two of them. Osamu James Nakagawa is the Ruth N. Hall's Professor of Photography and Director of the Center for Integrative Photographic Studies at Indiana University. James has produced work that develops in key ways out of his experiences in both Japan and the US. His work has been exhibited internationally with solo exhibitions, including Okinawa Trilogy, Osamu James Nakagawa at the Kyoto University of Art and Design, and Gama Caves at PGI in Tokyo. James has been a recipient of the 2009 Guggenheim Fellowship, the 2010 Higashikawa New Photographer of the Year, and the 2015 Sagamihara Photographer of the Year in Japan. His work is included in numerous public collections, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the George Eastman Museum, Tokyo Metropolitan Museum of Photography, the Museum of Fine Art in Houston, the Sakima Art Museum in Okinawa, the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago, the Nelson-Atkins Museum of Art, and the Indianapolis Museum of Arts. James will speak first about his current work, and then we'll be joined by David Ondrik to discuss the show the two of them have curated together in the Cook Center, Photographic Occurrences. A brief note to introduce David so that we can have a seamless transition when he is ready to join James. David Ondrik's artwork is held by the New Mexico Museum of Art, the University of New Mexico Art Museum, and multiple New Mexico public art collections. Publications include Photography, a 21st Century Practice by Mark Chen and Chelsea Shannon, Undermining by Lucy Lepard, and Photography, New Mexico by Thomas F. Barrow and Kristen Berenson. He has a BFA in Studio Art from the University of New Mexico and an MFA in Studio Art from Indiana University, where he is a lecturer in photography. James and David will try to talk to about quarter to the hour, thereabouts, and then we'll be able to take some questions. So if you do have questions, just find a little way to pose those questions and they'll get to me, and we'll have a little Q&A towards the end of the hour. With that, it's my great pleasure to turn it over to Osamu James Nakagawa.
Okay. Let me share screen. Okay, so everybody can see it? Oops. Okay, am I getting any feedback or not? But okay, I'm going to talk about this. First, today's talk is I was asked to do my current work as well as my experimental nature of my work throughout my career too. So I'm just going to start out with the introduction of how I start kind of experimenting with my work in photographic work. So I have two modes of visualizing my concerns using the photographic medium. One, personal introspective and poetic, often tends to express with this with a straight photography. And then other is visualizing the social, political, and historical concerns from my cross-cultural multiple point of views. Over the years, my conceptual concern and the photographic or image-making experimental approach became more complex with combination of off-site interests. East, West, my case, America and Japan, past and present, representation and reality, information and emotion, and description and abstraction, and documentation and imagination, and image and object, and light and shadow, and chemical process and digital workflow, photography and painting, drawings, and printmaking, and chemical and inks, and photography and computer imaging, and straight photography and manipulated photography. These are lists of things, but I kind of think about it in kind of simultaneously when I'm making work, and then keep questioning myself. I approach my work questioning how these multiple concerns relate and contradict, and find the best ways to incorporate them visually and photographically into my work. To work in this ambiguous and gray space, I had to experiment, define, or invent my visual languages, which exist in between the list of concerns I just mentioned. My first digital work, which you're viewing, you're seeing right now, my first digital work from MFA thesis 1992-97, this is a long time ago, but allowed me to combine documentary and street photography with the American topographical landscape to demystify and critique the American dream. I was attracted to the American dream and then considered to move to Houston because my father's business, but in 1977, but realized the gap between the Hollywood or Disney utopia reality and the reality of living here as a minority. This was almost done 30 years ago with a very primitive computer and Photoshop 1. This graduate thesis work became the foundation for developing my concerns while experimenting and pushing the boundary of medium to invent my photographic language. Instead of rejecting the digital technology, which a lot of people did in the beginning, I learned how to accept and incorporate the camera and printing technology, even though it was very primitive to my work early on. So from that driving theater work, worked for 5 years, and I started to, then I got, my career kind of launched with driving theater work soon after my graduate from MFA. But then after 5 years, I started to question if I'm looking at United States and Japan, stepping one step out from the culture and then viewing them, and then where am I standing? So I started to question about this in-between interstitial kind of space and how to visualize that. And the result was I became very abstract. And also, you have to know that at that time, computer was very slow, and it was very hard to make kind of painterly work because you move the mouse and then clock turns, and you cannot do anything for a while. So you have to go get coffee and come back, and still clock is turning. But I found a way to make these work kind of became kind of visceral cultural space. And I made this work and had an exhibition or installation at the Contemporary Museum in Houston in 1998. And then I'm going to quickly move to about, I would say, 7 years or so to work. I have started doing this when I after moved to Indiana. In between the work I just showed you of the abstract work, I made a work about more introspective, and it was my family photographs, and it was very straight. I mean, it was straight photography, but it's called CAHI series, and I created the kind of photo essay or narrative of my father dying cancer and my daughter was born, and then I moved to Indiana. It's all happened in 1998, 99. So I made a series of work. But I'm going to move on to the Okinawa work and then quickly talk about work after my Guggenheim project. But I start working on going to Okinawa in 2001. First time I just went by myself, and I didn't know anything about Okinawa, and drove around and stayed there for 2 weeks. And I went to this Okinawa Prefectural Peace Memorial Museum and saw this video, 8mm video of Battle of Okinawa that Marine Corps took. And I was stunned because it's 1,500 ships parked outside of the island, and is shooting up this island. And being Japanese American, and also I'm Japanese too, so it was very hard to see two countries fight against, and then also the Okinawan people were caught in the middle. So I'm going to contextualize a little bit about Okinawa. Okinawa Prefecture consists of 160 islands in the far south of Japan. This is the area where the Ryukyu Kingdom flourished as a seafaring nation for more than 400 years, since the 15th century. Visiting Okinawa even today, with its diverse ecosystem of rare plants and animals, its coral reefs and primeval forest, you can't help but wonder at the archipelago rich environment and the culture it has nurtured. When I visited Okinawa, I was shocked by the gap between picturesque landscape. It's almost paradise. Probably, I think, more beautiful than, I'm sorry about comparing with Hawaii, but I never seen anything like that before. The ocean was, pure, clean, green, and then skies blue, and it was really, I was stunned. And then it's a tragic history. I mean, which led me to start working on my series of work about Okinawa since 2001. Then 5 years later, I returned to Okinawa, wanted to make work about Okinawa during my sabbatical in 2005 to start working on the Banta Cliff, my first major body of work from Okinawa. So also these islands have darker history. Invaded by Japan and then put under its control first in 17th century, and again in Meiji period, the Japanese government took Okinawa and laid claim to its land. Moreover, during World War II, fierce battle were fought in Okinawa between Japan and America, with more than 100,000 civilians death. Actually, 200,000 people died and 100,000 were civilians. And today, the US maintains a larger military presence in Japan, and more than 70% of base in Japan are located in Okinawa. This chain of small islands has been repeatedly tossed about by these two countries and deeply wounded. By living in more about the history of the island, I'm learning more, living there, and then learning more about this history of this island, and my cultural identity bridges Japan and America has been pulled back and forth between these two cultures, mirroring the experience of Okinawa. So these were the archive photograph on the top is April 1st, US landed to Okinawan Island and started invading, and 90 days of battle started. And then one on the right, Typhoon of Steel, Ernie Pyle described while he was there about this crazy the battle in this island, small island. And also you can see I said 15,000 ships parked outside shooting up this island. So I started to think about how these land witness these violence, and I wanted to take photograph, if I can, the residue of what happened in this land. And then furthermore, as an outsider to Okinawan culture, for me to come face to face with Okinawan men confronting my personal history. My wife is Okinawan and my daughter is Okinawan Japanese American. One may see that these works were created as an object documents, but rather, objective documents, but rather as a personal dialogue between the artist and Okinawa, as my attempt to make invisible memories visible through the power of imagination and photography. So I created Banta from 2005-2008, receiving the grant from IU, allowing me to go there for the sabbatical. And later on, this work was acquired by Metropolitan Museum. You can see that here on the left to Cliff work, and it was shown in 2012. And then also, I was selected as Discovery Award at the Arles Photo Festival in France in 2012, both 2012, to show my work there. So this Cliff work, it was digital experiment I came up with, creating hyper-real, sharp images, high resolution, and then also altering the perception, which created the vertigo experience to the viewer. So it feels like you're falling down on this cliff. Also, I wanted to show these details so people can see maybe this is the bullet hole, and then actually one in the middle, the white part is the remains of the bombing of from the American ship. And then from that, I moved on. I applied Guggenheim Fellowship with Banta work, and I proposed to go into the cave known as a suicide cave in Okinawa. Okinawa has thousands of caves because of the coral reef limestone island, and also existed for thousands of years. And then also Okinawans are highly spiritual and then also shamanistic culture, and they often make pilgrimage to the inside the cave, and so it's a sacred place as well as functioned as cemetery. But during the World War II, this place became foxhole as well as the field hospital for the Japanese military, but U.S. unfortunately used that as a place to use the flamethrower, sometimes pour the gasoline and torched these caves while people were inside. And then also Japanese military were in the cave and encouraging them to commit mass suicide. So when I was working on the Banta, Japanese high school, a Ministry of Education were declaring that they are going to soften the nuance of mass suicide driven by Japanese military from the high school textbook. And 100,000 people got together in Okinawa and protested against the change. And I was right there when I was making Banta Cliff. So I decided this is a sign I really need to go into the cave and take photograph. So this has been shown many different places. One of was Museum of Fine Arts Houston had kind of survey exhibition of war photography, and this work was one of the work was included, as well as other exhibitions. So to go into the cave, my relatives said no way, because it's a spiritual place as well as horrible thing happened. So my wife's family didn't want me to go in. And also they're afraid of me bringing back bad spirit home. So my cousin-in-law made arrangement for me to meet Miss Miyagi, who is the high rank Sherman, and I met her. And well, to make the long story short, she gave me a blessing, and she said, "I'm a ear of tiger, and you are destined to do this," and then release the spirit from this cave. And then one on the right is Mr. Kuniyoshi, who one of the photographer friend from Okinawa introduced me to Mr. Kuniyoshi, and he has been going into the cave collecting all the stuff that he finds in the cave. And so he gave me my tour. Without that, it was very hard for me to find these places in the jungle, in a small hole, and then but he really helped me out. So I look like this when I go into the cave. Yeah, it's already 10 years ago, but I don't know how many times we went back to Okinawa. Every break, sabbatical as well, but Guggenheim sabbatical as well. But I don't know how many times I went back to summertime, wintertime. I just went back and forth between Bloomington to Okinawa and going into the cave. So as I said, that these are sacred places. So there's some place has altar, and also, as you can see the remains of people who used to live in the cave during the World War II. And this one is all kind of charred black on the ceiling because of the flamethrower and burn. I still can smell the burn in these caves too. And you find medicine bottle, the bones, skull, sometimes, yeah. So it's not kind of pleasant place to be in, and bats are flying everywhere. But I set the camera, open the shutter, I walk around, and then paint this place, because without using a flashlight, you cannot see anything. So I invented to create and reveal these places, and hoping to see something that we cannot see in the dark. The vertical line is a roof hanging down from the ceiling of the cave. And sometimes you have river inside going through inside the cave as well. And then I'm gonna introduce one of the influence for making this work. Bunta Cliff was outside, obviously. So I take photograph and then stitch it together to create hyper-real image and alter the perception. But this one is different because it's not, you can't see anything. So I have to change the method of working. And then also it's all black, so there's no color too. And to introduce these colors in the post-process of Photoshop, I looked at many painters, I would say. Anselm Kiefer is another artist, and then I really studied the texture that he brought into his painting as well. And then content of his work is sometimes Auschwitz and Holocaust, so it's kind of similar concern there too. And also I challenged myself to stitch in the dark. I thought it was impossible, but towards the end I got used to creating, you can figure out what kind of exposure you need to make by the size of the cave. And then things are getting easier while you work long time. So I challenged myself to stitch in the darkness, and these two are stitched images. And then I can show you a little bit of the how I experienced in the cave. So this is what I experienced. My work reveals everything, so it's so different from how I experienced. The work was I think the consequence of taking photograph in this kind of situation and bringing back to the to Bloomington and work on the computer to reveal little by little, reveal and colorize and create or paint, I would say, that work. So from there, I had an exhibition in Houston, and then I stopped by at the Manio collection, and they were showing Richard Serra's huge drawing, these black drawings, and it's on the paper. And it just stunned me because it was similar to my experience in a cave. I was just standing in front of this corner of this painting for a long time. And then it's just funny thing, it's a strange thing was you started to see these texture that on the surface of paper, and then a little bit of color and nuance of this darkness. And then I really thought if it's possible to make work similar to this and then make the viewer experience the darkness. And then also Richard Serra once said that drawings always underneath a painting, and then you cannot see it. So he said, my drawing, I want to make the drawing visible. And so my attempt was, what happened if I print the photograph and do something to it, and then it's hard to see the photograph, it's underneath of ink. So I experimented with digital printing and then applied sumi ink over it and folded it together and then opened it. And then I thought it was very interesting. So I took photograph of surface of cliff while I was working in the cave because it was too dark. So when I came out, I wanted to do something. So I started to take a photograph of cliff surface that looked like face in it. Because so many people said, when I look at my work, I see faces and all that. And then another influence is Mike and Doug Stone twins. I worked with them when I was in graduate school, working for the Bluffer Gallery in Houston, University of Houston. And they were kind of huge star of photography. And they introduced photography as an object, and they made sculptural work and very physical and tactile. So I started to experiment with printing the cave, the surface of rock and surface of cliff, and then apply sumi ink to make it darker so it's hard to see. And then also I introduced rust onto this paper because you see orange spot when you walk down by the coral reef, when low tide, these kind of metal bombing, I think residue of bombing or metal surface, and then you see this orange spot. So I wanted to mention that. And then the same time, I start making black the cave prints with using digital carbon print, which converted Epson printer to all black inks, different shades of black, and then print black and white print. So you can get all the detail in the darkness. So I was working with my former student in Paris who owns the print shop. And he created these prints for me and showed in Paris Photo in 2014. So this is the first time I showed this work. So this work, it takes time for your eyes to adjust and it starts seeing the photographic images or surface of rocks or cliffs. So I'm going to show you some the process. So I make this kind of crazy saturated prints, and then I wet it and turn this backside, and then wet it, and then start applying semi-ink to it, and let it sit for a while, and then turn them around, and then apply more semi-ink. But then this, when it's wet, I would say it's all black and you can see anything, you know, you can even see the photographic image, but when it's dry, it will dry up like 70%. So you started to see texture. And sometimes it looks like a face somewhere. So this is the process of making these. And then I had a chance to show this at the University of Tokyo University of Arts for this for one on the wall size. And then more recently, I had a chance to show this work in Tokyo Photographic Art Museum with Gerald Richter, Rieko Shiga, and Ken Kitano, and others. And then I had a chance to do this 36 feet and 7 feet high installation to create kind of cave-like shape with my cave photographs. And then from that, I was more interested in tactile, as I said. You know, I was working on the hyper-real surf photographic images that it looked like 3D. So people start touching my prints too. And then I started to wonder why, yes, it looks, you know, sharp, and then transcended the photographic reality to some kind of painting or object, but it's not, because when you touch it, it's just nothing there. So I started to feel like I missed touching using my hand. And I started to do the frottage and rubbing of the memorial, because I'm working by these war memorial by the cliff. So I was reading all that, and then I started to think that it's, you know, most of them are, you know, the memorial from different prefecture in Japan, commemorating the soldier who died in this Battle of Okinawa. At the same time, from Okinawa's standpoint, 100,000 civilians died. And then where's the memorial? And then, you know, I'm sure these memorials were built during the bubble economy in Japan. So it looks really glorified, the militarism in Japan, while so many Okinawans suffered. So I started to rubbing these words. I single out these words and repeat it and created this rubbing. This is a straight rubbing of the text, but some of them, you know, live, spirit, military, rain, blood. But then I brought back this and then digitized it and created film, and then start making salted print, which is uses silver nitrate and salt water. So I used the salt water from ocean, Okinawan ocean, and then coated the paper in a small apartment that I rented, as you can see in the bottom, and combined with cyanotype and salt print to create juxtapose 2-3 different the words to create these abstracted images. Ocean, water. And this was my lab. And the funny thing is, I create the curtain, outside the curtain, there's a nice balcony. So I was washing and then processing these prints. But then in front of my apartment was elementary school. So kids were looking at me. That's so funny. I thought I thought I was doing some kind of weird chemical thing. So this is very intuitive when I coat the paper. The paper is a ginger paper from Okinawa. So and then also cyanotype, I used like even Okinawan lime juice to create enhanced blue. So it's and then using that Okinawan sunshine to expose these images. And then this series is called Map. So it looks like the ocean and the islands. So I made 80 prints of these over the 3-4 years. And also I exhibited in Indianapolis a couple years ago. As you can see, this is an installation. And at the same time, when I had it, I made cyanotype as well, straight cyanotype of directly place it onto the military fence as my protest against this base in Okinawa. So initially I made 10 images, and then I thought it was really interesting. So I keep going back to Okinawa, and my wife helped me too, but I made 90 prints. Each one of them are 24 by 30, so quite big. And I intentionally coat this paper unevenly, so it looks like melting, or maybe it looks like smoke, or maybe, the fence is melting. And then I created this installation. And I was asked to exhibit in Kyoto Photography last April, but the whole thing got canceled. And in collaboration with my friend and associate dean, Roland Ricketts, creating the indigo felt fence in the middle of this room. And then also we started to collaborate and experiment creating digitized cyanotype on rice paper, ginger paper, and he dipped this onto indigo bath and creating such a hybrid. Started out with a cyanotype, digitized digital print, and now it's indigo digital. I don't know what this is, but I think it's really interesting. And I can wait to go back to Kyoto and have an opportunity to do exhibition together. And then also, okay, this is the last, most recent work that I've been working, but 2016 to present, as soon as Trump became president, I started to question things are happening very strangely. And then also, we didn't know, he would start saying the alternative truth and all that. And then, I started to question, what is going on? Are we going backwards? So I revisited my driving theater work I did in graduate school. And that work has digitally imposed KKK, border issue. And then also I made a work reacting to the Rodney King incident and back in '92, but then things are happening again. So I revisited all my negatives, driving theater negatives, and recreating this work, mixing positive image and negative image in one image. So these looks like dark black and white image, but has certain part is negative, certain part is positive. So this is another experiment I did. So started with, and then I went back in the Midwest to take photograph of these abandoned driving theaters and recreating and mixing positive and negative, kind of dystopian work. So you can't tell because I erased all the lines that created by meeting this positive and negative by going over these images, and then becomes kind of strange reality. So that's it for me. So I will stop sharing. And David.
Thanks, James. So James is invited.
I'm going to stay on.
I'm sorry?
I'm going to stay on with you.
Okay, great. James invited me to talk about the exhibit that we co-curated called Photographic Occurrences. And this is currently up at the Cook Center in Maxwell Hall. And it's the inaugural exhibition there in the Cook Center. I don't have the notes to talk at length about what the Cook Center is, but it's a great exhibition space where faculty in the arts and humanities will be able to showcase their work. And so before I get into this too much, we have a few thank yous I should read about Photographic Occurrences. Thanks to Sarah Martin for designing our catalog and this excellent postcard that we're showing you right now. The artists for agreeing to participate in the exhibit, especially on short notice. James and I just started putting this together in August, and that is fast for an art exhibit. And everyone was excited to be part of it and helped out quite a bit. And we also want to thank David and Martha Moore, Arthur Liu, James Nakagawa, and PGI Gallery for loaning works for the exhibit. And this exhibit came about because Takashi Arai, a friend of James, was supposed to come in 2020 as the SIPS OVPR Public Art Fellow and have a billboard installed in downtown Bloomington, do talks and workshops around his artwork with the IU community, but of course COVID cut that out and shut it down. And James and I started talking about this experimental approach to photography. Arai uses the daguerreotype process, which is what was invented in 1839 as the first commercially viable photographic process, but he's using it in 2021 to create his images. And this connects to IU through the founder of the photography area, Henry Holmes Smith, who is a professor here from 1945 to 1977. And Smith not only founded the photography area, he helped create one of the first schools in the country that offered the Masters of Fine Arts degree in photography. And a tremendous number of important photographers studied with him: Jerry Yulesman, Betty Hahn, and Robert Fichter, to name three. Smith was also an avid experimenter, and this ties back to what James was mentioning about how he invented his own visual language, as did Smith. You can see in these are fully non-objective abstract images that you may even question, how are they photographs? He used a variety of definitely what we would call alternative processes to create images that could then be exposed onto light-sensitive paper. On the left, we have a screen print, like an Andy Warhol style screen print. And on the right is a dye transfer print. This is a process that was used almost exclusively in advertising, but in the 40s, 50s, 60s, Smith was using it to create his artworks. And in looking at this history of experimentation at Indiana University, it's actually, Smith started it and it's continued ever since. And so artists that have come through the program, gotten their master's degrees here, faculty that have come to teach, have continued this experimentation in photography to create photographic objects. This is something that photography is in a really transitional period right now. So much of how we interact with photography, the way you're interacting with this presentation right now, is digitally. We created a exhibition entirely made out of objects. Everything is considered for its objectness, for its photographic nature. What material is it printed on? Here on the left, we have Professor Ricketts in the Fibers program, who's used woven fabric and indigo, and the texture is very rough. It's also very specific, very thoughtful. In the middle, we have Jung Lee, who's used the albumen process, which is also from the 19th century. Again, the paper, the surface, everything is very considered to make an object, even though it is matted and framed. And on the right, we have Professor Elizabeth Claffey, who's made a sculptural piece out of cyanotype and altering a textbook, The Wealth of Nations. all of this work requires the use of the artist's hand, the consideration of surface, whether we're talking about something that uses lens-based imagery, like you can see on the right, or completely cameraless processes like James' map piece there in the middle, which you heard him talk about. Tracy Templeton's etching based off of a lens-based image. And I'm sorry to say I'm drawing a complete blank off the top of my head. James, who's on the left?
Jacqueline Wright.
Jacqueline Wright, who has a mix of lens-based images, graphic images. It's mounted on aluminum, laser cut to create an actual three-dimensional object. And so this kind of experimentation, this kind of consideration of photographic object was the guiding principle of the show. It's not connected conceptually at all. Every artist is working with their own conceptual concern, but they're working in ways that create physical things, physical items of artwork, oftentimes one of a kind. For instance, Garrett Hansen's piece on the right, this is a one and only photogram, which is not how a lot of people think about photography. And so this is up at the Cook Center. It's a really fascinating exploration of the way the broadness of photography as a medium, something that doesn't exist just on a small screen, something that exists as a well-considered item. Sometimes it exists as something bigger than you and I, such as Morgan Stevenson's soft sculpture, where it's printed entirely on fabric that is then hand-stitched together to create the object that you can see there on the right.
And then also, I'm going to add to the history of this, our photo area, is that Betty Hahn was known for experimenting in even 60s, printing on the fabric using silk screen or gum print, and then, doing that embroidery over the photographic image. And it was back in 60s. Now everybody's printing on digital printing with the fabric and then doing similar thing. But, we have history of the masters, they were doing that, so that's like serendipity, comes around. It's a cycle as a department, I think, too.
Yeah. So we wanted to show you a preview of the exhibit. These are install shots of what's up at the Cook Center now. And it's a mix of emeritus faculty, alumni.
Yeah.
The alumni, some of the alumni goes back to the 1960s. Some of the alumni just graduated in 2020. And so we hope that you'll take the chance, if you're in Bloomington, if you're on campus, to come to the Cook Center. They have quite extensive hours, and the security protocols are all in place for a safe COVID-era viewing experience. But all of these artworks really want to be seen in person. They work best if you're standing in front of them. These digital representations of them are adequate, but it really calls out to be there. So we hope you'll take the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
So that's fantastic. Completely loved everything that I saw, and we have some time for questions. If any questions want to be written into the Facebook feed, that would be great. I'll wait for that, but I'll ask a question which seems to be go right to the heart of what the two of you were talking about, but it only occurred to me in the middle of James's presentation. You were in the caves.
Yeah.
And you said, I needed to learn how to stitch. I needed to stitch. And I didn't know what you meant. And so I need you to—
Okay, I'm sorry. I mean, the Banta work was, you see the cliff, and then I wanted to make kind of vertical image, and then wanted to gain the high resolution. So I took section of these cliff, and then later on stitched together in Photoshop, and then alter the perception. But my thing is how the people expect to do the same thing, because I was successful with a cliff, but then when you go into the cave, it's totally different environment. And then I have to come up with a new way of visualizing. So when it's pitch dark, I didn't even think about stitching because you can't see anything,
Right.
right? So I worked differently, but then towards the end, even pitch dark, you take one photograph and wait for 20 minutes to show up on my back of my camera, and then looking at that, and then you see it with a flashlight, and then move the camera so I have overlap, and then make similar exposure, go around and light it and make an exposure. Then later on, I could stitch it together. So that's what I meant. But in theory, it's difficult to stitch in a dark time.
So the stitching, yes, I can imagine. So the stitching is actually happening as a process within the digitization, right? I mean,
Post-production.
Right. Whereas the sculptural piece that David showed at the end in the Cook Center, where it's printed onto fabrics, and then it's literally stitched together, those pieces.
Right.
Yeah, okay. That's great. Thank you.
Those are physical stitches, and mine is digital stitching.
Yeah, well, but it's also interesting that the metaphor is so
Metaphor, yeah.
connected to the hand, and there's something very tactile about it.
Mm.
What kinds of responses have you had to the very, very dark ones, the nearly black ones that you talked about in the relationship to Richard Serra?
It's interesting because I show that in Tokyo and also here too, but especially Tokyo Metropolitan Museum of Photography. It's a photography museum. People come to expect to understand photograph.
Right.
Photographs, you look at the information, signifiers, that's a tree, that's a dog, and then you make sense out of it. But I don't think when you go look at Rothko painting, you don't expect to understand. You want to feel.
Right.
But photography, because of the nature of representation, people always say, I don't understand, oh, I understand. So people trying to understand what you see and then juxtapose and then get a meaning out of it. So it was interesting. I kind of threw everybody off. But having a cave photograph around it and then installation, people responded well.
Yeah.
Because I gave them an experiential place. They can experience that, feel like they were in a cave. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's great. And in fact, the stuff with Roland Ricketts and some others, they seem very immersive. Some of this new work, you're trying to surround people, and that's making me think of, Serra obviously has a lot of his work is about putting somebody in a particular place with regard to his sculptures. It's true in the Rothko Chapel. It's true there are some backgrounds that seem relevant to this immersive.
But
thing.
Jonathan, the joy of working here, I have an incredible faculty members. Roland and I totally respect what Roland's doing, and then I am influenced by him too, and then probably vice versa. And then Arthur's doing a hyperreal video, 8K video, but video is images. It's not photograph. It disappears. Even though you look, seems really real, it's not there. So in a way, hyperreal, I think about this kind of stuff a lot. What's physical, what's fake, what's illusion. Yeah.
I mean, it looks like I don't think I saw one piece of work of yours in that entire presentation that was, as it were, attempting some sort of documentary, unfiltered change documentary thing. You've taken that from the start. You've taken this medium, which is understood to just report on the world, and said it doesn't report on the world. It is a practice that changes the world, and I'm going to run with that in a major way, and all the way to painting. I mean, as you say, some of these more recent works really feel like painting.
Yeah, it's dark.
Yeah, but also just the way it gets done. The way it gets done. David, do you want to jump in and answer some questions or talk a little bit more about the show, which is fantastic. And I want to echo what David said about people coming to see the show.
Yeah, I got to see it.
The Cook Center is not fully operational because it's a really big place and we're still under COVID restrictions. But these two shows that are up there now are really the inaugural events, and we're really excited about them. And as David says, all the protocols are in place. You can definitely come and have a very safe experience walking through both the exhibit they talked about tonight and Sarah Martin's exhibit in the Grand Hall. So I want to just reiterate that. So do you guys want to talk a little bit more just for a few minutes about the show? And
I mean, I think the strange thing is that this whole idea came quickly because of Takashi's, billboard didn't work out. And then I was talking to Ed about celebrating faculty members, alumni, and then also the graduate students. And then it was maybe stretched to connect Takashi's work to Henry Holmes Smith, but I think, I was surprised getting all the real work come in and looked at it with David and go, damn, this makes sense. Yeah. And it's about, and then it's a strange thing that it came out of virtual time. Everybody's looking at photograph through this screen. You're not real here, right? But it looks at photograph, representational. But then we were thinking about physical photograph as an object. So
yeah. Well, that's and the readiness of many of these artists to use techniques that are so old and require a different kind of physical posture, right? Daguerreotypy and albumin and. My sense is part of the reason people reach for those is precisely to have a different kind of physical relationship to the process. Is that right, or is that?
Yeah,
I think it's correct. And also a lot of these 19th century processes have been able to come back because of digital cameras. Carlton Watkins had to schlep around a 30 by 24 camera. So the back of it was massive and glass plates, and nobody wants to do that. But our iPhones now take photographs. You can make a digital negative and make a relatively small albumin print like Watkins did, just with something you can carry around in your pocket. But also, one of the things I think our medium is struggling with is, what does it mean to make photographs in a world where Instagram has something like 12 billion photos uploaded to it? What does that even mean?
Yeah.
I can't get my head around 12 billion. So
yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I mean, I've thought about some of this stuff with regard to other arts, and there's always this rhetoric that says, when you have these new transformations, the old art gets, kind of ash canned. It's gotten rid of or whatever, but that's patently untrue. I mean, you can look around and you can see that these things go on and on and on. They're just in a different context. They're done differently. It's nothing's going to get canceled. I think for sure.
I think one more unique thing about this exhibition that David and we curated is through looking at the IU history, it reflects history of photography.
Yeah.
I mean, daguerreotype is from Takashi, but then from all the way to, albumin, salt print,
right?
cyanotype, and then mixed with digital with the cyanotype. I mean, it's just really interesting. Yeah.
Right, and various other kinds of printing devices and other kinds of printing materials to print on as well. Yeah.
What we're missing historically is a wet plate or an ambrotype.
Wet plate.
That's photography nerd talk right there. All right, we've reached our hour, but I wanted to. I know some people have been writing in on the Facebook with some questions of interest about the catalog and when there will be a catalog, if there will be a catalog. Can you tell us about that, either of you?
David, you want me to say it?
There is a catalog. we have a first edition made, but we now want to make a second edition that the show's been installed so we can put install shots in it. And as I think as part of just the newness of the Cook Center, we're not 100% sure how it's going to be available. But we have a handful of this first edition one at this point.
Yeah.
Do you know more about that, James, yet?
Well, second edition will have installation shot in it. Right now, this doesn't have just the artist and the essay by Lauren Richmond from the Eskenazi Museum. And yeah, it's beautiful book though.
So even the first edition, are there copies that people could get? And if so, how could they get them?
We haven't talked about it, David.
Okay. All right. How about this? How about if people want to check back later about somehow getting, because I know we have people who have been tuning in, not in Bloomington, and they may not be able to, just walk into the Cook Center. Okay, so we'll hopefully be able to answer some questions about that in good time. One last question has just come in. And here's the question. Why did you in the exhibit frame most works behind glass and with part-two? Like this raking away or hiding part that would be important? The haptic feeling of the surface or what?
I'm going to say my very practical answer. I didn't put under the glass for my work because I want people to see the paper, the Okinawan paper too. But somebody else's work, we need to protect it to a certain point because this is a public space. If we have a choice, some of them we didn't put, like a Takashi Sugiura type, you have to take the plexi box off so you can hold it and you can see it. But yeah, that's
a curator's decision about security and protecting the art.
Yeah, and it is, in some cases, it is too bad because you lose the texture of the paper that Jeff Wolin chose for his salt prints and palladium prints, and you lose the texture of some of the others, but also they are fragile pieces of paper.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a trade-off.
And some of the 3D productions in the exhibit are just begging to be touched, but of course we actually can't really touch them. It draws out this desire for the tactile that we can't really satisfy. So I think this was fantastic. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much.
And people have been appreciating it on Facebook. So we have some more, CAHI has other Meet the Author, Meet the Artist events through the spring. So check back with us. Come to the Cook Center to see the exhibition. Congratulate our two artists here today. It was a wonderful tour through some of this stuff. And we'll see you later. Have a good weekend, everybody.